Destination. Truth wasn't canceled because of ratings. It was canceled because Sci-Fi couldn't afford the $2 million per episode budget. Travel Channel was secretly poaching Josh Gates with a better offer, and insurance companies refused to cover the dangerous investigations after too many near-death incidents. Subscribe now because the real story involves Josh's secret negotiations during Season 5, crew members who couldn't physically continue, and a format that had become financially impossible. The creative differences excuse was a lie. The truth is about money, danger, and a network that lost their star to a competitor. In April 2012, Sci-Fi Network and Pilgrim Studios issued carefully worded press releases announcing that Destination Truth would conclude after its 5th season, with both the network and host Josh Gates offering vague, diplomatically phrased statements about the show reaching a natural conclusion, and Josh pursuing new opportunities without providing any specific details about what actually motivated the decision to end one of Sci-Fi's most recognizable and internationally successful adventure series. The official statements thanked loyal fans for 5 seasons of support, celebrated the show's accomplishments in bringing viewers to remote locations around the world, and praised the dedication of the cast and crew who had risked their lives investigating cryptozoological creatures and paranormal phenomena across 6 continents. Josh Gates' personal statement emphasized his gratitude for the opportunity Sci-Fi had given him and suggested he was excited about future projects, but notably avoided explaining why those future projects couldn't happen within the Destination Truth framework, or why the show was ending when it still had a passionate fan base and respectable ratings. The careful corporate language and conspicuous absence of specific reasons immediately triggered skepticism among industry observers and dedicated fans who recognized the hallmarks of a sanitized public relations narrative designed to obscure uncomfortable truths about business conflicts, financial pressures, or creative disagreements. Multiple aspects of the cancellation announcement didn't align with the official natural conclusion narrative and suggested something more complex was happening behind closed doors. Season 5 had been notably shorter than previous seasons, producing only 10 episodes compared to the standard 13-episode orders that characterized seasons 1 through 4, indicating production problems or budget constraints that forced abbreviated filming schedules. The episodes themselves felt rushed and incomplete compared to earlier seasons, with investigations receiving less screen time, fewer days allocated to each location, and noticeably reduced production values suggesting tighter budgets and compressed timelines. Several international locations that Josh had mentioned in interviews as planned destinations for Season 5 quietly disappeared from the filming schedule and were replaced with domestic United States locations that required significantly less travel expense and logistical coordination. The show's devoted online fan community immediately began analyzing these inconsistencies and questioning the official narrative. Recognizing that successful shows with loyal audiences and respectable ratings don't typically end abruptly with vague explanations unless significant problems exist that networks prefer not to discuss publicly. The fundamental financial reality that ultimately doomed Destination Truth was its extraordinarily high per-episode production cost that ranged between $1.8 million and $2.3 million depending on location difficulty and international travel requirements, making it Sci-Fi Network's most expensive unscripted series by massive margins and creating an unsustainable economic model that couldn't be justified even with respectable viewership numbers. To understand why the budget was so astronomical compared to other paranormal investigation shows, it's necessary to examine the specific cost categories that made international adventure production exponentially more expensive than studio-based or domestic location programming. International airfare for the core production team of 8 people, including Josh Gates, 2 camera operators, audio technician, producer, production assistant, and equipment specialists typically cost between $40,000 and $70,000 per investigation depending on destination, with remote locations requiring multiple connecting flights, specialized charter services, or helicopter access, adding substantial premiums to basic transportation costs. Local fixers, guides, translators, and security personnel who understood the terrain, spoke local languages, could negotiate with village elders or government officials, and provided essential safety oversight charged between $5,000 and $15,000 per investigation depending on location danger level and required expertise. Professional camera equipment, lighting systems, thermal imaging devices, audio recording gear, and satellite communication systems required for broadcast quality production needed to be either shipped internationally at costs averaging $30,000 per location when accounting for customs fees, insurance, and potential damage or loss, or rented locally when available at similarly expensive rates. Hotels, food, and ground transportation for 2-week investigation periods that included pre-production planning, actual filming, and post-investigation interviews averaged $20,000 per episode, with remote locations requiring premium rates for basic accommodations and secure equipment storage. Specialized transportation, including helicopter rentals for aerial establishing shots and access to mountaintop locations, boats for water-based investigations, and rugged off-road vehicles capable of reaching remote sites added approximately $40,000 per episode to production budgets. Location permits, filming fees, and payments to local governments or landowners for access to protected areas, sacred sites, or private property reached as high as $25,000 for particularly sought-after or restricted locations. Comprehensive medical insurance, emergency evacuation coverage, and security personnel required for filming in dangerous regions, politically unstable countries, or areas with wildlife threats cost approximately $35,000 per episode. During the filming of Destination Truth Season 5 in late 2011 and early 2012, Josh Gates was simultaneously engaged in confidential negotiations with Travel Channel executives who had been monitoring his work for several years and recognized his potential to become the face of a new adventure investigation franchise that could compete with rival networks' exploration programming while attracting broader demographics than niche cryptozoology content typically reached. Travel Channel's proposition offered Josh substantially improved financial compensation, estimated at $75,000 per episode compared to the $40,000 Sci-Fi was paying him, representing nearly double his current salary and acknowledging his increased market value after 5 seasons of building name recognition and establishing himself as credible adventure host. Beyond the immediate financial incentive, Travel Channel offered Josh executive producer credit and significant creative control over the new show's direction, allowing him input into episode topics, investigation approaches, and narrative framing that he never possessed at Sci-Fi, where network executives and production company maintained final authority over all content decisions. Most importantly, from both professional and personal perspectives, the proposed show format that would eventually become Expedition Unknown maintained the international adventure travel element that had made Destination Truth successful, while shifting away from exclusively paranormal and cryptozoological topics toward broader historical mysteries, archaeological discoveries, cultural traditions, and treasure hunting narratives that could attract mainstream audiences beyond the young male demographic that dominated paranormal programming viewership. This format evolution offered multiple advantages. Investigations could occur during daylight hours rather than requiring dangerous overnight operations in abandoned buildings or remote wilderness locations would generally be safer archaeological sites, museums, or cultural centers rather than isolated jungles and crumbling asylums where crew injuries were constant concerns. And the show could appeal to family audiences and older demographics interested in history and culture rather than limiting itself to paranormal enthusiasts. The broader topic range also provided virtually unlimited investigation possibilities compared to Destination Truth's inherent limitation of having a finite number of famous cryptids and paranormal legends worth investigating, ensuring the new format could sustain production for many years without becoming repetitive or creatively exhausted. For Josh personally, the transition represented an opportunity to evolve his professional brand from that guy who chases Bigfoot towards serious explorer and cultural documentarian with credibility to investigate significant historical mysteries and archaeological questions, positioning him alongside established adventure hosts rather than paranormal television personalities. The production insurance crisis that developed over Destination Truth's 5-season run ultimately became one of the primary factors making the show financially unsustainable, as the accumulation of dangerous incidents, crew injuries, medical emergencies, and near-death experiences caused the insurance company providing coverage to dramatically increase premiums, while simultaneously adding restrictive exclusions and requirements that made international adventure production prohibitively expensive and logistically complicated. During Season 1, the show's production insurance cost approximately $200,000 annually to cover standard liability, equipment damage, and medical emergency situations that might arise during filming, a reasonable expense that production budgets could easily absorb. However, by Season 3, after multiple serious incidents had occurred and the insurance company recognized the extreme risks inherent in Destination Truth's investigation methodology, annual premiums had increased to over $500,000 while coverage terms became increasingly restrictive. By Season 5, The insurance situation had deteriorated to the point where annual premiums exceeded $800,000, quadruple the original cost, while entire categories of locations and activities were excluded from standard coverage or required expensive additional riders. Specific incidents that triggered insurance company concerns and premium increases included Josh Gates's malaria infection, contracted during a Papua New Guinea investigation that required hospitalization and weeks of recovery, his rope bridge collapsed during that same investigation, where the bridge gave way while Josh was crossing a jungle ravine, and he narrowly avoided falling to serious injury or death by grabbing support cables. The crew's detention at gunpoint by local police in Thailand, who suspected them of being foreign spies or drug smugglers, created an international incident requiring embassy intervention, and demonstrated the political risks inherent in filming in countries with unstable governments or corrupt law enforcement. An ATV accident in Romania, where a cameraman lost control on a mountain trail and crashed, sustaining injuries requiring a week of hospitalization and emergency medical evacuation back to the United States at enormous cost, highlighted the transportation dangers involved in reaching remote investigation sites. Multiple crew members contracted serious parasitic infections, food poisoning, and waterborne illnesses during various international investigations, requiring medical treatment and, in some cases, evacuation from remote locations where adequate healthcare facilities didn't exist. The altitude sickness incident in Tibet, where several team members, including Josh, experienced severe symptoms at high elevation, requiring emergency oxygen administration and immediate descent to lower altitude, demonstrated the environmental hazards of extreme location filming. After 5 consecutive years of filming Destination Truth under conditions that required constant international travel, investigations in extreme environments ranging from Arctic cold to tropical heat, overnight operations with minimal sleep, and exposure to dangerous wildlife, contaminated water, and infectious diseases, the cumulative physical and psychological toll on Josh Gates and the core production crew had reached levels that made continuing the show unsustainable regardless of any other factors. Josh Gates personally bore the most visible burden as the on-camera host who participated in every investigation and endured conditions that would have broken many people after a single season. His medical history from 5 years of Destination Truth reads like a tropical disease textbook. He contracted malaria twice despite taking prophylactic medication, with the parasite causing debilitating fever, chills, and exhaustion that required hospitalization and months of medication to fully clear from his system. He suffered dengue fever during a Southeast Asia investigation, experiencing the severe joint pain and flu-like symptoms that give the disease its nickname, breakbone fever, and left him weakened for weeks. 3 separate parasitic infections acquired from contaminated food or water in various countries required medical treatment with harsh medications that caused their own unpleasant side effects. He experienced severe altitude sickness during high elevation investigations in Tibet and Peru, requiring supplemental oxygen and emergency descent when symptoms became dangerous. Multiple falls during nighttime investigations in rough terrain resulted in torn ligaments, deep bruises, and chronic back problems that required ongoing physical therapy and pain management. The cumulative sleep deprivation from filming investigations primarily at night while traveling constantly across time zones created chronic exhaustion that affected cognitive function, emotional regulation, and physical recovery capacity. Other core crew members suffered equally severe consequences from the brutal production schedule and dangerous conditions. Cameraman Evan Stone broke his collarbone during a Season 3 investigation when he fell while carrying heavy camera equipment over rough terrain, requiring surgery and ending his season prematurely. Audio technicians suffered hypothermia during an Iceland investigation when weather conditions deteriorated rapidly and the team couldn't reach shelter quickly enough, requiring emergency medical treatment for dangerous core body temperature drop. Multiple crew members experienced food poisoning or waterborne illness serious enough to require evacuation from remote locations where adequate bathroom facilities or medical care didn't exist, creating both health crises and production delays as filming had to halt while crew recovered. While Destination Truth maintained respectable viewership numbers throughout its 5-season run and never experienced catastrophic ratings collapse that would typically trigger immediate cancellation, the show's audience trajectory and demographic profile ultimately couldn't justify its enormous production costs within Sci-Fi Network's evolving programming strategy and increasingly competitive cable television landscape. Season 1 premiered with strong numbers averaging 1.8 million viewers per episode, demonstrating immediate audience appetite for Josh Gates's adventure investigation format and validating Sci-Fi's investment in expensive international production. However, ratings gradually declined over subsequent seasons as the novelty faded and competition from other adventure and paranormal programs intensified, with Season 5 averaging approximately 1.2 million viewers, still respectable numbers that many cable shows would celebrate, but representing 33% decline from premiere season that indicated troubling downward trend rather than stable or growing audience base. The demographic composition of Destination Truth's audience created additional concerns for network executives evaluating the show's value proposition. The program primarily attracted younger male viewers aged 18 to 34, which represented a valuable and sought-after advertising demographic that brands paid premium rates to reach. However, Destination Truth's expensive production budget meant the show needed to deliver exceptional ratings within that demographic to justify costs, and 1.2 million total viewers with perhaps 600,000 falling into the target demographic simply wasn't exceptional enough to warrant spending $2 million per episode when alternative programming could reach similar audience sizes at fraction of the cost. More fundamentally problematic was Sci-Fi Network's broader programming strategy evolution that occurred during Destination Truth's run and ultimately rendered expensive location-based reality programming incompatible with the network's financial model and content priorities. By 2011 and 2012, Sci-Fi had shifted focus toward 3 primary content categories that offered better return on investment than adventure reality shows: low-budget paranormal investigation series like Ghost Hunters, Paranormal Witness, and Haunted Collector that could be produced for $300,000 per episode while delivering comparable or superior ratings to Destination Truth. Original scripted series including Warehouse 13, Haven, Being Human, and Alphas that could be filmed on standing sets with controlled production conditions and budget predictability that location shooting couldn't provide, and wrestling programming through their WWE SmackDown acquisition that delivered guaranteed ratings with minimal production involvement. The logistical complexity of producing Destination Truth across dozens of international locations throughout 5 seasons created constant operational nightmares that consumed enormous amounts of time, money, and energy while generating unpredictable problems that could derail entire investigations and waste hundreds of thousands of dollars in sunk costs if permits were denied. Political situations changed, or local complications arose after production teams had already committed resources. Every international investigation required months of advanced planning and coordination, beginning with preliminary research identifying promising locations with compelling cryptozoological or paranormal legends, continuing through diplomatic negotiations to secure necessary government approvals and filming permits, and culminating in on-ground logistics arranging local support staff, transportation, accommodations, and security measures. The permit acquisition process alone often took 3 to 6 months of persistent effort navigating foreign bureaucracies, submitting extensive documentation about production intentions and crew credentials, paying official fees that ranged from hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars depending on location prestige and government corruption levels, and in many cases paying unofficial facilitation fees to local officials who controlled access and could indefinitely delay permits unless appropriate financial incentives were provided. Production coordinators spent countless hours researching local regulations, identifying proper government agencies and contacts, preparing permit applications in foreign languages, and following up persistently to push applications through bureaucratic systems designed more for obstruction than efficiency. Even after securing permits, political instability or policy changes could invalidate permissions with little notice, as occurred during the planned Egypt investigation that had to be canceled at the last minute when government turmoil made the country too dangerous for American film crews, wasting over $100,000 in deposits for locations, guides, and transportation that couldn't be recovered. The Malaysia investigation illustrated how local law enforcement could shut down production despite having obtained proper permits, when police arrived at the filming location claiming the permits were invalid or improperly issued and demanded the crew cease operations immediately, resulting in 3 days of negotiations, additional payments to various officials, and significant delays that compressed investigation time and forced rushed filming to meet production deadlines. Equipment shipping and customs clearance created persistent headaches as sensitive camera gear, Electronic devices and technical equipment had to be transported through international customs systems, where officials often didn't understand the equipment purpose, suspected smuggling or espionage, or demanded bribes before releasing shipments. After 5 seasons and over 60 investigations spanning 6 continents, Destination Truth's fundamental format, traveling to remote international locations to investigate cryptozoological creatures and paranormal phenomena reported in local legends, had exhausted its creative possibilities and locked the show into repetitive narrative structures that even the most dedicated fans recognized as formulaic and predictable. The premise's inherent limitation became increasingly apparent. There exists a finite number of famous cryptids, legendary monsters, and paranormal phenomena with sufficient cultural recognition and compelling backstories to justify expensive international investigations and sustain viewer interest through hour-long episodes. By season 5, the show had already covered virtually every major cryptozoological creature known to Western audiences, including multiple Bigfoot investigations in different regions, Yeti searches in the Himalayas, Loch Ness monster expeditions, chupacabra hunts in Latin America, Mothman investigations in West Virginia, orang pendek searches in Indonesia, and dozens of regional creatures that existed in local folklore but lacked broader cultural resonance beyond their immediate geographical areas. Similarly, paranormal investigations had explored haunted castles in Romania, spirit-infested islands in Japan, cursed locations throughout Asia and Europe, and possessed forests across multiple continents. Each investigation followed nearly identical narrative structure regardless of specific creature or location. Josh and crew arrive in local area and establish investigation context through meetings with witnesses who describe sightings, strange occurrences, or legendary accounts passed down through generations. The team interviews locals whose credibility ranges from genuinely puzzled witnesses to obvious attention seekers telling exaggerated stories for camera time. They consult with regional experts, folklorists, or researchers who provide historical and cultural context about the legend's origins and evolution. After establishing the mystery through daytime interviews and location scouting, the team prepares for overnight investigation by deploying standard equipment array including thermal imaging cameras, night vision devices, audio recording equipment, motion sensors, and various detection devices. The investigation itself consists of Josh and crew members walking through dark forests, abandoned buildings, or remote wilderness areas during nighttime hours, reacting to ambiguous sounds, unexplained temperature changes, and equipment anomalies that might indicate paranormal activity or might result from environmental factors, technical glitches, or imagination amplified by darkness and expectation. Inevitably, thermal cameras capture ambiguous heat signatures that could be animals, humans, or camera artifacts. Audio equipment records unexplained sounds that could be wildlife, wind, or distant human activity. Expedition Unknown gave Josh everything Destination Truth couldn't: investigations of historical mysteries, lost treasures, and archaeological sites he was genuinely passionate about instead of just cryptozoology. Safer daytime filming versus dangerous overnight operations. Broader demographic appeal attracting families and older viewers, not just young males. Travel Channel's bigger budget justified costs sci-fi couldn't rationalize. Josh evolved from Bigfoot guy to credible explorer and cultural documentarian. Expedition Unknown, now in Season 12, proves format's longevity versus Destination Truth's creative exhaustion after 5 seasons. The cancellation was blessing in disguise.